Here's what I feel today. Here's where the stories continue to evolve. And I can say I have changed a little on this. Right, as we've kind of learned and walked through this entire process, and the books aren't fully open to us at the very beginning. And initially, way back when, it was Mike Lombardi right after the Combine, who knows all the GMs and heard the rumblings and started this kind of fire, and now it's grown and grown. I think here's what I can say very clearly. It does take two. When we did this a week ago, I thought, well, maybe the only way he's gauging or maybe why they're not diffusing is, well, maybe Richard's also interested. What yesterday did, what that sound clearly tells me, what I think any of these people around the NFL that have been in it for decades are going to say the same thing. Why is John being so transparent? Why is he being so open? Because both sides are engaged. You don't do this to your star player and your best player. You don't do this one-sided. And he just said it. You don't ram it down players' throats. Not the way they've done it here. They can do and operate the business that way in other spots. That's not the way Pete operates. That's not the way in any way, shape, or form they've operated in their run.
Yeah.
And this has only gotten to this point of transparency and honesty.
All right. I think it's a really good point.
Are pursuing.
Really good point. And it actually leads me to speculate on something. Now, this is speculation. But based on some of the fact and some of what's gone on behind the scenes. 206-421-3776. Start grabbing your calls here in a moment. If not, I'm trying to piece together all the little parts of this puzzle, right? If we know, or we don't know, if we can safely assume that 98% of all deals don't get done. John said that a couple of times. If we can assume, Brock, as you just said, that it takes both sides, or at the very least that Richard is interested in departing Seattle. If those two things are true, and John has been incredibly, in fact, oddly forthcoming about all of this, and then if I take one last piece, which is John Clayton saying he believes that nothing will happen and that the Seahawks and Sherman will end up ironing things out the same way they had to do with Cam Chancellor and Russell Wilson and some of the other people they've had disputes with in the past, Michael Bennett included, that maybe that's why they're being so transparent. That, hey, look, we're not going to be able to get anything done for Richard Sherman. It's just too expensive. You're not going to be able to. Nobody's going to give us back what we really need. We're still in our window of trying to win. All the arguments that the pro-Sherman people have made. And by the way, you and I are on the pro-Sherman list and have been forever. We would love to keep him here in Seattle in some way. But man, is his attitude making that harder and harder? If you're John Schneider and you hear that Richard Sherman doesn't want to stick around, and you know that you can't get enough value back in order to make a deal, wouldn't you make all this public and then at some point say to Richard, hey, man, we did everything we could. Yep. We tried. We opened up the phone lines, as Andrew Brandt just suggested. We went on the radio. We went on television. We went to the meetings. And everywhere we went, we said, hey, we're listening. We're open to the conversation. But unfortunately, nobody seemed to really want you. I mean, at some point, isn't that your out if you're John Schneider? Yeah. Doesn't being public about this give you your out at the end of all this to find a way to reconcile with Sherman?
Yes.
It's one of the only scenarios that truly makes sense.
Yeah, Mike, it's why when Cam did his dance, I was as adamant as possible. I called it borderline selfish.
Yeah.
And you
Still
were
blocked by Cam.
And you were adamant as well, saying you just can't win this.
Yeah.
You're just not going to win this. I'm sorry, you may be adamant, and I've heard from somebody there at the Players Association as well that's alongside in those meetings, and Richard is adamant, and he wants change, and he wants to strengthen the players' union. It's ridiculous, the back seat that they sit in so many of these negotiations and in everything. But I'm sorry, right now, you don't have the power that they do. Mm-hmm. And I think, yes, in this little power play, guess who typically wins? Not typically. Guess who almost always wins?
The House. It seems like that's the case.